Call to order the Riverside Zoning Update Steering Committee, meeting number 6 on Wednesday, December 29th at 5 p.m. Please call the roll. Somebody?
Sorry. Let's see. Committee member Pollock.
Here.
Committee member Hennigan.
Here.
Committee member Cermak.
Here.
And Chairperson Mateo.
I am here, so we have a quorum.
Very good.
Ms. Monroe, please go ahead and do your legalese.
We'll do the spiel. Okay. So we are, as you know, we are holding this electronic meeting because of a declared public health emergency. And so as such, we need to remind everybody of the following. The general public is allowed to follow our meeting live. It should be a meeting that is accessible. I'm watching to see if there's any other people who join into the meeting, and we'll have this recorded. So we'll post this for others to view. Anybody who participates in the meeting is allowed to offer live comments, and they are able to also provide us other comments as the meeting occurs through email. We have to have somebody on site, so both staff members are present at Village Hall to ensure that has been met. If there's any votes that are taken this evening, we'll conduct those by roll call. We have identified our members participating remotely, and members at the meeting site, make sure that you can see or hear each other, or at minimum hear each other at any point. It sounds like we can. If you cannot hear at any point in the meeting, just let us know, and we can pause that. We'll make sure that that's also, we can still hear to the end of the meeting. Everyone present needs to be able to hear to participate. So we are keeping a verbatim record of the meeting by recording this, and that is all that I need to share this evening. So if anybody has any questions, then please let me know.
Thank you for that. Next on our agenda is approval of meeting minutes. We don't have minutes, so we're going to skip that one. And then obviously what we're here for now is discussing the proposed amendments. Does anybody have any general thoughts before we proceed?
I'll jump in there, Jill. This meeting really came to be because of a conversation that Jill and I had, and I after the board meeting, I felt that this committee really didn't have any closure, in the sense that I wanted to make sure all of us had one last chance to provide any direction to Planning and Zoning Commission as they begin their review. I don't know if we need to make a recommendation per se. We could, that's always an option, but I don't feel a need to do that, but we can if people would like to. But I just wanted to make sure that we were all in agreement on what we were forwarding, and there really were only a couple of issues that I had that I wanted to clarify a little bit on. But yeah, that's about all. In general, that's I wanted to just share that.
Thanks, Doug. I'm working on two different screens and I couldn't get my mouse back over to unmute me. Anybody else? Well, I have a list of questions, issues that I think we can discuss at either a general level or get very specific depending on your interests. But I will say that I was surprised and disappointed that we didn't receive updated memos from our consultants. So what we're looking at does not reflect the meetings that we had to discuss the memos. I don't know if anybody's been in touch with Todd or Con, but I think we should have updated ones that reflect our work to send to PZC. Does anybody agree with me, disagree with me, not care?
I mean, I think we definitely need that. I don't know how we could move it forward without having that. I mean, that reflects the work that we did. That was the whole point of the committee.
Right.
I know I'll speak up. I know that Todd and I exchanged just comments recently. I asked him about the minutes. He had said that they would be provided to us, to the committee, in early January. He was working through those, and that he was glad that the committee was meeting on their own for further conversation. So he didn't give me a date, but he did say that after the first of the year, he's hoping to have something back to the committee to provide, reflection of what work the committee's been doing. And if there's another meeting that's planned, minutes to be voted on, and any other wrap up that's needed. I think this committee had wanted to meet ahead of time and discuss those couple of things that you've been referring to.
Is it your impression that we will get updated memos or just minutes?
I will verify his wording in just a moment, but I know he for sure said minutes. I will verify whether there's memos, and if not, I'm certainly comfortable asking for that, if that's the committee's desire.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think we do need a summary memo. I mean, I could tell you what was in the board packet back in, was that November? I felt this way when I looked at it, and I was involved, but I know at least two other elected officials, and I could sense that all of the elected officials looked at that and said they were overwhelmed by the way that was presented. And I would really like to see the consultants try to present it in a more manageable way. And my suggestion in that would be to separate the substantive issues from the clarifications and the policy statements. Yeah, there's a lot of the amendments are like, what is the purpose of the TOD zoning district? That's not something that the Planning and Zoning Commission or the board is going to want to spend a whole lot of time on. But I really want them to identify the real substantive issues, like increase in building height, decrease in parking requirements, somehow separate that out so that planning and zoning and the village board really knows what they need to be concentrating on, because they're all volunteers, and it's difficult when you present something that's just that big. I mean, there were 100 pages of information, or 50 to 100 pages, I don't remember, but it was a lot. And they need to kind of, and I include myself in this, we need to have our hands held and walk us through this in a manner that we can understand what we need to concentrate on, and not have to figure that out for ourselves. So that's really what I would like to see the consultants do for us, obviously with staff's guidance.
So I'm hearing a couple different things. Do we want the redlining updated before it goes to PZC? There aren't going to be a lot of changes, but there are some.
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, it can be done in both ways. I mean, you can have the redlined version, which people can refer to, but there has to be a summary attached to that says, bullet points.
Sure.
I think there are half a dozen at most real substantive amendments here that we really dealt with. Those need to be identified by the consultant so that P&Z and the board can focus on those. And all the other stuff is provided, and a redlined copy of the changes definitely should be provided. And, you know, if a trustee or commissioner identifies an issue that wasn't brought out as a substantive issue, they can bring it up. I mean, they have to have all of the information, but they need to have it boiled down to where they can grasp it a little bit better. Otherwise, both planning and zoning and the board are going to get caught up in discussions that aren't to the point, I think.
Jeff, are you in agreement on the updated redlining?
Gotta go unmute again. Yeah, I'm fine. I agree with what Doug was saying.
Well, again,
I'm probably not as opinionated on it, but you know, from what I'm hearing, yeah.
Okay. So those are the text amendments. So we would like that to reflect the work of the steering committee and the consultants. It never should have gone to the board like that, in my opinion. Okay, so that's one thing. And then the summary memo that Doug is asking for, that sounds good. Is it reasonable, Ashley, to ask the consultants to prepare that?
I think, yeah. So just to be clear, we're asking them to provide a summary memo of the changes that were identified, that it was a summary of kind of an expansion on prior memos that supplemented this work, I think, from past village staff members. I think if we are following the discussion, that's one reason that staff is participating this evening, is that if we have a grasp of what the committee may identify as substantive policy issues versus zoning recommendations that should be highlighted, then we could provide a supplementary memo for the board that defines those things. If the consultant work is different than what you're talking about. And I'm just trying to grasp, I guess, the content of the memo, and therefore it would kind of shape whether the consultants would be the ones to do that or if village staff would do that.
I suspect that village staff could do it because you have so much free time. Doug, what you're asking for is a distillation of things that are going to have effects on businesses and residents.
Yeah. Right.
And as you said, there's only about half dozen of them. The reason I asked, is it reasonable to ask TOD to do it? I don't know if they consider their work done. And I'm not sure, looking at their memos, they're very detailed. And I love the table where it allows you to click to jump to a section. That's not what we want going forward. We want a distillation, I think a verbal distillation of it.
Well, I think that I'd let staff figure that out. Personally, I would think that we'd ask them to do it if I were staff, but again, staff is ultimately responsible. And if I were wearing their staff's hat right now, I would ask them to do it and give me a draft that I would review to make sure it's up to snuff, that it's good enough. Now they may come back and say, well, this is beyond the scope of services, and you may not want to argue with them about that, and you may just end up wanting to do it yourself. But one way or another, I don't really care who it comes from. I just think that P&Z and the elected officials need to have a nice, concise summary of what they really need to focus on, just to expedite the whole process.
You read my mind. So we'll talk with the consultant team and see what they feel like they can do. And I'm certainly happy to see what kind of draft they might come up with and adjust based on our expectations.
Great.
So it's many places, they had a comment, insert graphic, insert graphic. Who's doing those graphics? Is that something that we might expect in the next version of the redlining, or are those graphics supposed to come from somewhere else? Anybody have any idea?
It's not something that I've talked with the consultants about yet, and it may have been covered in the initial planning phases of the project that, you know, neither of us were part of, but I will ask them and see what the plan is, if they have some available or what the case is.
I don't know if we spoke or had it in the project scope, but it seemed like this is what they should be doing. And if they're
Mhm.
suggesting we need a graphic, then it should be there. If they're, you know, rightfully poo-pooing some of the images we have in there now, we're not going to make them up. So I kind of expected that
Mhm.
from them.
Yeah, I would imagine that they're probably going to provide it, but I just don't know when or in what time frame.
So I wanted to return to the cap on office space on ground floor. When we talked about it, I think at the September meeting, we had a variety of opinions about it. So what are your current thoughts, if you've been able to think about it more? Minimizing inactive ground floor space versus keeping the percentage cap. Or if you don't care at this point and are fine sending it to PZC, that's fine too.
Well,
But it's
I'll say this, I'm not really sure exactly where it was left. I knew there was a couple ideas out there, but I still think that it just comes back to, you know, what the landlord, he's going to want retail space in there, and he's going to default to office space if he's not having any success getting the retailers. I think everybody wants a retailer instead. And the office space is going to rent for half of what the retail space typically would rent for. So, you know, it's almost just a supply and demand type of thing that we're, you know, you let the market control what's out there. Hopefully we've got the landlords and all those buildings are smart enough not to, you know, put a $8 a square foot office user in there when they can get a $20 a square foot retailer user. It's just my quick you know, thoughts on why, you know, let the market control what happens in those spaces. That's just how I feel about it. I don't know if I articulated that last time or not.
You did. I have notes,
Yeah.
supply and demand. So are you suggesting then that you are not in favor of Todd's suggestion that multi-story ground floor offices be special uses?
I almost think that it should be a special use simply because then you know, you can, the landlord can plead their case that he can't get a retailer in there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, as I recall, you said something about examining this on a case-by-case basis. I think, does that mean that you're also in favor of that special use as versus our current way of doing it?
Yes, I like the special use approach.
Jill, you alluded to our current regulations on first floor office. Can you or Ashley or Francisco or somebody kind of remind me what our current code says in the B1 and B2 districts about first floor office?
Ashley, do you, or Francisco, do you know offhand?
I think he's trying to search it up and we can respond in a minute.
I think, and we'll find out, in B2, there's a % cap on how many businesses can be offices, but it applies to the whole district.
So it's kind of first come, first served. Once the entire district reaches a certain percentage of first floor office, no one else gets to do it.
That's my memory of it, yeah. And I don't recall if it applies to B1 as well.
That sounds familiar. It's been a while since I've looked at that. I've kind of forgotten how that's structured, but yeah, I'm okay with making it special use. It's a very difficult land use issue that a lot of villages struggle with, because you don't want office, but you also don't want empty spaces. So, and you also want to be fair and equitable to the different landlords. You know, what we have now is, you know, if that is the way it's structured, that's a little bit awkward to me. But, well, I'm fine with it just the way it is with the special use. Although, I mean, one could argue why does a one-story building get it as a permitted use and a two-story building doesn't? Does anyone remember why they made that distinction? Why the consultants and why we went along at the time? I don't remember. If I'm the owner of a two-story building, the next door is a one-story building, I've got to wonder why I'm being picked on, so to speak, or being discriminated against. And maybe it should be a special use across the board, even in a one-story building, for office use.
Well, I did find a section in 1062F that reads offices professional on the ground floor. And it says in the retail core of the B2 district, as identified in Appendix A of this zoning ordinance, ground floor professional uses in combination shall occupy no more than 20% of the linear street frontage, unless approved as a special use. Upper story offices shall be permitted uses and shall not be included in determining this percentage. And so I think we're still trying to identify the B1 usage, but that was one that led me from a use table.
Okay, so the other question, that what about one-story buildings versus two-story buildings? Why did we go that direction? Does anyone remember what the distinction and reason for that was, rationale?
Go ahead.
Was it a discussion about uniformity of like a pedestrian street frontage that led that conversation, as far as having I don't know, the look of a uniform two-story or higher street frontage rather than a one-story and to two? I can't recall.
know.
We'd have to go back.
Well, I guess just to wrap up that issue, I would suggest that we leave it as is as far as what's forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but in the summary memo, I mean, this is a substantive issue that would be those half a dozen or so that Jill and I were referencing, and I think the direction to P&Z would be, look at that and, tell us, give us your thoughts on that. Like I said before, we don't have to make a recommendation on these things, but this conversation we're having right now, we can share that, send that along to P&Z in the summary memo and just say, we want to restrict it, but we'll leave it up to you, the details, I guess.
To revisit the permitted uses for professional offices, and the B1 table just identifies office professional as a permitted use in both the B1 commercial and B1 transitional commercial districts. So there's no distinction upon the ground floor uses or second story.
Okay. I don't know, does the committee want, Jennifer, Jeff, Jill, you want to just make it in the B1, B2, first floor office as a special use across the board rather than permitted use in one-story buildings?
I think that's the way to go. I mean, like you said, why penalize one guy just because he doesn't have a second floor on it? Put everybody on the same playing field.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
Sounds like we have consensus.
Next on my list are the minimum and maximum building heights. Any thoughts on that, or happy to send that along?
I like the idea of increasing the building height, but I'm a little leery of it. I think that you know, it's something I definitely want to see aired out by planning and zoning, but I'm just, you know, I want them to understand, I guess, that at least me personally, and the other committee members can weigh in too, but at least me personally, I'm not committed to that. As if I had to vote right now on whether to approve an amendment increasing the building height, I'm not sure how I would vote as a trustee. I need to, yeah, and that also gets to another issue that was brought up to me by a fellow trustee, was that you know, we haven't gotten a lot of public input on this. We tried. I'm not criticizing anyone. You know, this is just the nature of these things. Is, you know, people don't care until it's in their backyard, and then they do care. And I'm just concerned that you know, this building height increase goes through, and then there's a building that is actually that tall, and people are wondering, well, what the heck, you know? So that gets to the other thing I wanted to bring up is when it does go to P and Z.
PZC.
What's that?
PZC.
PZC. Okay. When it does go to PZC, do we, what kind of public notice do we do? I know the legal minimum is just a notice in the newspaper and published on the website, but do we notify property owners in these districts as well as maybe adjacent property owners? It's a rhetorical question where you can answer it if you have an opinion, but something we need to consider. But I guess my only thing on just to wrap up the building height issue, I just want to be clear that, yeah, I don't want anyone thinking that because that's coming out of this committee and being forwarded with that increase, that I'm necessarily committed to doing it.
Channeling Michael Mars, I suspect, and Lance, I suspect they would say we don't need to do specific notifications because the proposed changes apply to all districts in the village. And they are very wary historically of trying piecemeal notifications because it puts us at risk of somebody saying, well, I didn't get a notice.
No, I understand that, but I guess I've just, you know, I'm not, there's never a good answer. Believe me, I've been, you know, doing this and dealing with that notice issue my whole life, and it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
One thing we can do, and I don't know if we have before, when we have public hearings, we have the yard sign put out so that neighbors can see it. Maybe we could do that in front of town hall. just as, you know, one way for people to see it if they're not looking in the public notices of the landmark.
Depending on I think that's fine, Chair Mateo. I think that depending on what, I guess, what the appetite is from appointed and elected officials and volunteers for generating a certain level of public notice, we can, you know, do what's needed and expand our attention or notices if there are additional notices that we want to put out through social media, through extra news release on our website. If there are other ways in which we feel we could get the engagement of the public, if that's what's desired, then we can just level up whatever that communication is, if it's additional signage. Further, you know, if there are, you know, if we're not taking each and every piece of any text amendments all at once, then you have, you know, then you have an opportunity to segment the education for the public on what those changes would be that might be of interest in particular areas of town. You know, and anything, of course, too, that gets amended would then still likely have or could potentially have some process by which public notification would be given to direct neighbors within our, you know, notification boundaries. So if there were height changes to a building or whatever the case is, and the process ends up being that it's each case by case basis through zoning commission, then you know, that'd be an additional layer of public notification at that time.
That's something we can work out when the time comes between staff and PZC. I think the idea of allowing the public many opportunities or educating them is taken, and we will pursue that.
Jeff and Jennifer, what's your thinking on the building height changes? Are you pretty comfortable with that? Are you more where I'm at or extremely opposed to it?
I'm pretty comfortable with the building height. You know, it's a limited number of properties that this is realistically going to apply to, only those with new development happening on them. So I'm okay with that. I think the neighbors are going to complain about the building height regardless of what that building height is. I think anything above 2 stories is going to get opposition, even if it completely meets code. So I'm not really that concerned because I think the objections will be the same regardless.
Yeah, I'm concur with what's being said. Am I muted? Oh, no, I'm not muted. You know, it's just, it comes down to economics. I always look at it from a developer. I mean, he's going to want to go as high as he can. So you've got to be careful with that. You know, and he wants his densities and everything else. But again, it comes back to the economics. So, you know, I'm okay with what you're recommending there.
Any thoughts on uses that were added or removed? So for example, co-working and the live workspace, those are concepts that they added. Be honest, I don't know what the difference is between live workspace and a home occupation, but that's something that PZC can work on.
Do we have definitions in there for co-working space?
Yep. I can read it to you if you want.
I can look it up.
They're in there.
I did read that, and my question was, what's the difference between that and an office?
And I remember us having that exact discussion at an earlier meeting. So I'm not sure if this really reflects, if what we're looking at reflects what we had talked about previously. I guess that gets back to us needing an updated version of things.
Right, when we talked about the first floor offices, I have a note here that we need to clarify what office means. And I don't know that we ever did.
I just start saying that, you know, there's cash register retail. I mean, that's simple. You're collecting sales tax on it, you know, it's not office. And then you sort of fall between where they're going to have blinds and they don't want anybody looking into the office space because of what they're doing in there. And it really doesn't matter what they're doing in there as compared to like a financial office where people are coming in, or therapy or physical therapy and doctor's offices and medical, whatever. So yeah, I think you need to put some type of clarification because, you know, it's sort of different levels. You've got the cash register, you've got the, you know, you've got the beauty salon that may not be that big of a cash register, but still would be considered retail. But then you start falling into the financial services, accounting services, and that, you know, that they can just as well go up on a second floor. But so you need to put some definition to what's the difference between an office and what's not an office, what's a retail use.
That's helpful. Doug, you had mentioned that you were potentially concerned about making assisted living permitted use, I think in the B1. Is that something you want to talk about or just let PZC work on?
I don't think it should be a permitted use. I think a special use is fine, but it's basically a residential use or institutional at best, and it's not a traffic generator or economic generator in any way. So it seems to me that we would not want to encourage an assisted living facility in the B1 or B2 districts.
I don't remember why all assisted livings in B1 and B2 are special use except in the B1C, and I don't recall why they suggested that change. We
I
could
thought
just,
maybe I misread that. I thought we'd listed that as permitted in both B1, all the B1s and B2s.
not as currently proposed.
Okay.
So we could just say, go ahead, Ashley.
I was just going to add that the current use tables just state, and that may be in the edits here, but it's a special use for B1, both districts. And then in the B2 sub-district, the assisted living facility is a permitted use. And there's nothing else in the other retail core. There's nothing allowed there.
I'm sorry, which district was it permitted?
The mixed use periphery. So
Which is where? Well, I know where that is. That's like
yeah,
downtown.
it is.
Right.
They're kind of in the zoning map. There's a pink, kind of a lighter
Right.
reddish pink areas.
I still kind of think that ought to be a special use, but
Well, my question is, what Jennifer and Jeff, do you agree?
I'd be
But-
okay with that as a special use. You know, it is just a residential use, basically. So if we're wanting to encourage more commercial, then it should be a special use.
Definitely special use.
Okay, so we'll make a note for Todd that we want to switch that to special use and let's get that taken out.
I hesitate to bring this up because it's a level of detail that we don't necessarily need to get into, but it's a pet peeve of mine. I noticed that there was a reference in the code to elderly housing, which I'm not comfortable with that term. I think it should be age restricted housing. I live in an elderly house. It's over 100 years old, but yeah, it should be age restricted housing, I think.
We
Just a little
suggested
side note.
senior, older adult. I'll add age restricted to the
Something
list.
that's a little bit more descriptive.
Yeah, I think that's some outdated language there we could do better with.
Right.
So I don't know if you looked at the project scope, but one of the points of doing this is to make Riverside more walkable and more transit friendly, bike friendly, pedestrian friendly. In some cases, really all that was proposed is inserting a phrase to increase walkability or something like that. Are we satisfied with the degree to which these changes address that goal?
In general, I would say yes. They've added that throughout the ordinance to continually reinforce it, which I think helps to get the message across in addition to the specific changes that have been made.
Yeah, I think
Go
we're
ahead.
going in the right direction.
One of the goals was to further enhance the walkability of the downtown core and the use of transit. And really all they did was talk about walkways in a parking lot or bike racks, bike parking kinds of things. But if we're okay with that, then good.
Yeah, and Jill, since you brought that up, I want to kind of elaborate on that. I think that may be the key to helping the P&Z, Planning and Zoning Commission, PZ&C, and the trustees is to, what are our goals here? And I want to make sure that they stand front and center, that here are our goals to make it a more walkable, transit oriented, etc. There are other ways to achieve it. And if Planning and Zoning Commission and the trustees find other ways to achieve it, that's great. It's always more than one way, but I think, the amendments we've discussed are definitely go in the right direction and contribute to achieving those goals.
One of the goals was to create design standards for outdoor cafes. I am not seeing that addressed anywhere. And I don't remember when Sonia put this list together and I worked on it with her. I don't remember exactly why that was put in there, except that restaurants might want it. Choo Choo wanted outdoor dining. Other restaurants did. Do we want to go back and have Todd add some design elements? Design standards, sorry. I'm being vague in part because I don't really remember what the goal for that one was or why that goal was in there. But if you think it's adequate, then just ignore it.
I think we need to update those standards, but maybe this isn't the time or place for it.
I agree that it would be something that would be nice to have, but if they haven't worked on it up until this point, I wouldn't want to take sort of a rush job of whatever they'd throw together. I'd rather us perhaps look at it as a separate issue later on this year.
Okay.
We can look, staff can look for any background information that might help us determine what was behind the inclusion of that aspect of the project.
And let me retract what I said. Maybe the 5-foot front yard of stores. In several places, they recommended allowing another 5 feet for restaurants that have outdoor dining. So maybe that's how they addressed it. And maybe that satisfied them.
It's a good start, but I think we'd like to go a little further probably.
Us. Any other thoughts? Anything from the sign code? Because that was a big component, because the B1 sign code had not been updated in quite a while. I had a note from one of our meetings that about what to do with non-conforming signs. Do we want to do what the board did with B2 after the B2 update? Just that when the business changes, they need to conform? Rather than grandfathering, saying you have to change your sign in 6 months or a year.
I think we should, yeah.
Well, if we want to see changes, that's really the only way to make it happen. If assuming, of course, the board has the appetite for that.
To be clear, Jennifer, you're talking about requiring it when the business changes or within a certain time span?
I was thinking when the business changes, but yeah, the certain time span I think would be more challenging.
I'll make sure that's in there. Anybody have other specifics they want to address? Well then, assuming we can get updated redlined text and a really good summary memo, are we okay then having this go to PZC?
Yes.
Yeah, if we get those things, yeah. If we don't, I'm not sure.
Right. And Doug, you said multiple times we don't have to make a recommendation. Does anybody want to make a recommendation or just pass it along? Hearing none.
I think we should just pass it along with our comments and minutes.
All right, well, I guess that's all we need to talk about then. Thank you, everyone, for having a meeting between Christmas and New Year's and getting this done so that it can go to PZC and hopefully with the changes that we're requesting. And thanks, staff, for staying late.
Of course.
Thank you.
Chair Mateo, just to give us a guideline for a time frame when we want to plan for these things. I know we'll, you and Francisco can discuss the agenda for the upcoming meeting. There's a couple of things that you have, I think, coming before you, but I guess depending on when the consultant comes back to us with any updates, any memo potentially, as well as the summary minutes, do you want staff to prepare and provide at least as much as we have for the upcoming packet, so you have additional time? The Planning and Zoning Commission might have additional time to review this and then take up specific topics in February. I'm just trying to get a sense so that I can communicate to the consultant as well a time frame that we're looking at.
Well, in a perfect world, we would have the updates for the January 26th meeting. I don't think that's going to happen. So short of that, perhaps the PowerPoint PDF from the December 2nd board meeting presentation can be on our agenda just to get us talking and thinking about it. I don't see any point in giving them the outdated memos.
No. Okay. Okay.
We can warn them how long it's going to be, how many pages.
Okay. Then yes, we will plan to get as much as we can. I will reach back out to the consultant and provide any notes or context here. I think there's some good feedback for staff as well in terms of, assessing what between this committee and what would be useful for commission review and for village board review to kind of package up materials and be able to present that information.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
So public comment is on the agenda. I assume we still don't have anybody in the waiting room.
There has been no one else that's joined this meeting.
Can't believe it. My gosh. Okay. And then next steps Ashley, you and I discussed this. It seems like Todd wanted the steering committee to meet again, but not until after all of our public hearings. Is that your memory?
Yes, I believe so. This may have been presented during the meeting. I don't have the slides handy in front of me. I had them and they disappeared. That's my understanding, that there may be an interest in gathering this committee at least one more time to review anything. I think a concurrent review by the various commissions would be fine. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I did try to reach out to him. He didn't respond this evening about whether there was a memo coming with it, but the minutes were confirmed. I couldn't tell from the way he phrased it if there was a memo as well. So I have asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so that means that we might meet again as a committee, but it won't be until toward the end of the process at this point. So motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have to do roll call, please.
We do, from left to right, committee member Cermak.
Here.
Okay, committee member Pollock,
Aye.
committee member Hannigan,
Aye.
and chairperson Mateo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a great new year. Be
Bye, Happy New
safe, be
Year.
healthy, and we'll see you around.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.